My talk tonight will be about how children should treat and respect their parents. Solomon tells us in the first chapter of Proverbs, beginning at verse 7. Turn to verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Now, verse 8. My son, hear the instruction of my fathers, and forsake not the law of thy mother. Verse 10. My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. Chapter 3, verse 5. Turn to chapter 3, verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. Verse 6. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Verse 7. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from the devil. Verse 13. Happy is the man that findeth wisdom, and the man that getteth understanding. Ephesians 4, verse 29. Turn to Ephesians 4, verse 29. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth. Verse 31. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you. Verse 32. And be ye kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake will forgiving you. Turn to Ephesians 6, verse 1. Ephesians 6, verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Verse 2. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. Now, Matthew 15, verse 4. Matthew 15, verse 4. For God commands, saying, Honor thy father and mother, and he that curseth thy father or mother, let him die the death. Now, turn to Matthew 19, verse 19. Honor thy father and mother, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Colossians 3, verse 5. Mortify therefore your members which are upon the earth, fornication, uncleanness, inadulterate affection, evil concupiscence, which is idolatry. Verse 6. For which things sake the wrath of God cometh on the children of disobedience. Verse 8. But now you also put off these anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy communication out of your mouth. Verse 9. Lie not one to another, seeing that ye have put off the old man with his deeds. Verse 10. And have put on the new man, which him that created him. 14. And upon all these things put on charity, which is the bond of perfectionness. Verse 16. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another, in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing in grace in your hearts to the Lord. Verse 17. And whatsoever ye do in honor or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God and the Father by him. Verse 20. Children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing to the Lord. Turn to Galatians 5, verse 22. Galatians 5, verse 22. But the fruits of the spirits is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith. Verse 23. Meekness, temperance. Against such these is no law. Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Joshua tells us in Joshua 24, verse 14, now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth. Verse 15, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
Tad did an excellent job, and I'd like to commend him for getting up here. It takes a lot of heart and a lot of courage to get up in front of people like this. I know especially Tad, he was a lot like me growing up. I know the first time I ever preached, somebody told me that they had never even heard me talk before, and they probably hadn't, I'll be honest. But Tad did an excellent job. He sounded natural up here in front of everybody. Didn't seem nervous at all. I'd like to kind of continue the theme that Tad started with. He really focused on children in the home and respecting your parents and that kind of thing. And I would like to continue that into looking at how children behave in the church, how children can be part of the church. So if you're a young person, listen up. This is directed at you. Throughout the Bible, children are used as a blueprint for how adults should act. It's mentioned several times where adults should act more like children. There's numerous occasions. 1 Timothy 4:12, it says, let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word and conversation, in charity and spirit and faith and purity. Let no man despise thy youth. I know as a young person, especially as a very young person, it's really easy to kind of get overshadowed by your youth, to let that kind of hold you back from doing things that maybe you would like to, maybe that you wish you had the courage to do. Maybe you just think that you aren't capable of it. You don't have enough knowledge. You've never done it before. It's a little scary to do new stuff sometimes. But sometimes you just have to step up and step out of your comfort zone. And I'd just like to start out by looking at a couple of biblical characters that are considered young people that really showed a lot of bravery, a lot of courage, and really showed the kind of personality and the kind of characteristics that young people should show in the church today. First one I want to talk about is David. David is one of the more interesting characters to study in the Bible. I really enjoy studies about David. There's a lot to learn, a lot to glean from it. But the one that I really want to focus on is one that we've probably all heard in Bible study classes growing up all the way from the time we were born, really. And that's the story of David and Goliath. It is probably the biggest underdog story in the Bible. It's one of the biggest underdog stories that you'll ever hear. And it's something that there's a lot to learn from it. So David is going to visit his brothers, which are at war. He walks up. He's a little short guy. I'm picturing, from scholars believe he was probably around 12 or so at the time. So he was, probably about this tall. I'm picturing a little scrawny guy, kind of like the water boy on the football team, that kind of thing. But I'm picturing this little small scrawny guy. He's walking in around all these warriors, all these grown men sitting around wearing their armor plates, their big swords. These are battle-scarred people. These are just, people that we would consider the toughest of the tough. And here little old David is. He walks in, And everybody's in this dilemma because there's this big Philistine on the other side of the mountain that nobody wants to go face. All these grown men in armor with swords, they're scared to go face him. And David walks in and tells him that he's not scared, that he's willing to take on Goliath. And everybody begins to mock him because obviously the little old short guy with the little old scrawny legs that's about 12 years old isn't going to be able to take on an 8-foot tall, huge man with all this armor plate that's never lost in his life, that's bigger than anybody that he's ever met. David obviously has no chance, or so it seems. So they mock David, they ridicule him, they talk down to him, they doubt him because of his youth. His brothers even went so far as to tell him that that was not a place for him. The battlefield is just where he did not belong, they felt. In 1 Samuel 17:33, it reads, "And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth." So David is a very young man. He has no experience with war. He is going up with a grown man that has been fighting his whole life. He has all the experience that anybody could ever have. He is an expert fighter. He is a physical specimen unlike anybody has ever seen before. But David is not deterred by this. Dropping on down to 1 Samuel 17:42. "And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and of a fair countenance." So this big Philistine, as David is walking in, he looks down at him, and he's thinking this is going to be an easy match. This is about like Alabama playing Giles County High School in football. I mean, he has this tied up with a bow on it. He's ready to go. He's not scared whatsoever. He's just out there for fun and games, basically. As we all know, though, David went on to kill the Philistine. He slew him. He won the battle that nobody thought that he could win. But he had faith that he knew through God and the power of God, and he trusted in God that he could pull through. Now, young people, I know that you will probably never have to face a giant in your life, or at least I hope you don't. But you will have to face a lot of battles in your own life, whether that be other people, whether that be challenges that you face in school and sports, whatever it is, you're going to face Goliath, and it's going to be up to you to either walk up there and fight, or to sit back and cower down like the rest of the Israelites did when David showed up. It is up to you to have that kind of courage that David showed. The next story that I'd like to look at is the little boy with lunch. He doesn't even have, his name's not even listed. It's usually kind of overlooked. It's not a very popular Bible story to look at, but it's in John chapter 6. We all remember the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. Although we often note Jesus' miracle, we must also not forget the role that the little boy played in this big monumental event. In John chapter 6, verses 8 through 9, it's John chapter 6, verses 8 through 9. "One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, saith unto him, There is a lad here which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. But what are thy among so many?" So this little boy, he shows up to this crowd with thousands of people, and all he has is 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fish. Seems pretty insignificant. I know grown men that can eat that in one sitting. And he is expecting to feed thousands of people with this. Obviously, Andrew is mocking him, is making fun of him. You know, this just isn't possible, right? But the little boy isn't deterred. Jesus, as we all know, made the food, stretched it to where it did work. But although the little boy's actions seemed so insignificant, he had so little to give compared to so many other people. But when it was all said and done, it ended up being so much. Children, I know that's the same way with you. You feel like you have so little to give. You have so little experience, so little wisdom compared to the older people that you're around in the congregation. But you have a lot to give. You have a lot of abilities that they don't have. You have the youth, the charismatic personalities, you have the excitement, you have the energy that a lot of people don't have. You have a lot of things that you bring to the table that other people don't, and you cannot overlook that. So what are some ways that youth can impact the church? There are many ways, and I'm just going to name a few just to kind of give you an overview. The first one that I thought was be an example. That's obviously the most important one. Number one, be an example to the other youth in the congregation, your friends, the people you're sitting on the pew with right now. But two, you can be an example to the adults around you. If you would, turn with me to Matthew chapter 18. It's Matthew chapter 18. We'll read verses 1 through 5. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Who then is greatness in the kingdom of heaven?" Then Jesus said, "A little child to him, set him in the midst of them, and said, Assuredly I say unto you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as a little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me." So this little child is brought in, and he tells this grown man that he has to act like the little child in order to go to heaven. You children, you can be an example to adults. It's shown here, Jesus said it. You can be an example. You can bring something to the church that some people cannot bring. You have the energy, like I said earlier. You have the carrying abilities. You bring a lot that other people don't. If you would, turn back to Matthew chapter 5, verse 16. That's Matthew chapter 5, verse 16. Everybody's heard this probably multiple times. "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." I know, I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago, this was our theme at camp, was "Let your light so shine before men." We used this verse, and all of the lessons that we did were around this one verse. And this is something that I really feel is applicable to youth, because they are really people that can let their light shine, that you really see. If you're here early for services or after services, you can see all the young children roaming around, and you can see the care and the love that they show. They really are lights. They really are lights in the world. There's a lot of opportunities for them. The second thing is you must always look for opportunities to learn. This is probably the hardest part. I know most children hate going to school. I always did. It's not fun. It's, in a lot of ways, it's not very fun to learn. But when it comes to Christ and the gospel, it is important that we do make a conscious effort to learn it. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 5 reads, "A wise man will hear and increase learning, and a man of understanding will attain wise counsel." Children, I ask you to always look to the older adults in the congregation. Look at their wisdom. Look at their knowledge. These are people that have been Christians for years. These are people that were in your shoes at one time. They've seen it all. They can help you to grow. They can help you become the strongest person that you can be at your age. They can help you the person that you hope to one day be. But always look for those opportunities. When you're in class, be attentive. Your teacher, they spend hours and hours preparing lessons for you. They hope to help you grow as a Christian, and the only way that you're ever going to grow is if you take it in and actually participate in those lessons. We have Bible classes so you can learn. They're really a privilege. You're lucky to be able to have the teachers that we have here at Fairview. They love you, they appreciate you, and they do everything that they can to help you grow. So make sure that you don't overlook that. You really are blessed to have that opportunity. So make sure to take full advantage of that. The next thing is look for opportunities to get involved. I know in this congregation, especially the youth, have all kinds of opportunities. We're really blessed to have it. You can look at today as an example, just the opportunity to have a youth day like this for the young men to be able to participate. This is really big. I feel like we also have camp and opportunities like this that you might not have other places, where you get to be around other Christians. You get to spend 3 or 4 days together. It's hard to go to school and to be around people that don't act like you, that maybe have different beliefs than you, maybe don't, I mean, they weren't raised like you, but you go to camp and things like this and you're around people that are like you, that want to grow like you, and it's really refreshing to get to see just how much potential there is and just how much growth can be had. So make sure to take advantage of events like this. We also have the Purity Days. I know there's one being planned right now. Make sure to attend these things. Be attentive. Do everything. Try to get involved in these things. Help plan them. Participate in them. It's very important. But the most important thing is not only to attend these things. Anybody can attend them, but to be excited about them, to look forward to them. I know every year at camp we give out an award. It's like the Most Spirit Award or the Most Excited to Be at Camp Award. It changes every year, but it's the same kind of deal. But it goes to the person that's most excited to be there. And usually it's somebody that has been looking forward to camp for I don't know how long. I think it was this year, Hudson Tarpley got it. And he had been asking Todd for months and months about when camp was. He was just ecstatic about going. And it's people like that, you can easily pick out the ones at camp that want to be there, that are excited to be there. And it's really encouraging to the other ones there, not only just to see a smiling face, but somebody who wants to help make camp a success. It's really encouraging to the others there. It helps others to grow. And without you and without your excitement, your encouragement, things like this aren't even going to be possible. And for those of you that are maybe on the older side of things, maybe those that participated today, this is an opportunity. But start looking for leadership opportunities. I mean, we're planning camp, we're planning Purity Days, we're planning things like this. There's all kinds of opportunities to get involved and take part in things like this. Maybe you just became a Christian or new or, whatever. Look to start serving. Maybe sign up to say a prayer every now and then. Maybe speak up in class a little bit more often. I'm sure your teacher would appreciate it. It would be beneficial to everybody in the class for them to have your participation and your involvement in it. It's important to everybody around you that you reach your fullest potential, and by you encouraging and reaching your fullest potential, the ones around you will likewise do the same in a lot of cases. That kind of wraps it all up, but maybe you're here tonight and you have yet to take on Christ. I would encourage you tonight to consider it. We have an easy plan that God has set forth. Here, Romans 10:17, believe, John 8:24, repent, Luke 13:3, confess Jesus' name, Romans 10:9-10, be baptized into Christ, Acts 2:38. The hardest part, though, is probably to remain faithful. We've all probably fallen short at some point, and maybe you're in those shoes tonight and you need to ask forgiveness of the church. If you need so, if you would come forward as we're about to sing this song, and somebody will say a prayer on your behalf. But if you have any need, if you would, come forward as we stand and sing.